My stepsister falsely accused me of stealing my dad's Rolex and got me kicked out at 17. 4 years later, my grandfather found out she sold it and disinherited her, leaving everything to me. I'm 21 years old, work in digital marketing for a startup, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened 4 years ago basically destroyed my relationship with my father and, honestly, almost destroyed me too. I guess I should start at the beginning. Or like, when I was 17 and living with my dad, Paul, and his second family, though calling it living is generous because I was more like just existing there. You know what I mean? My mom and him had divorced when I was like 12, and she wasn't in any condition to take care of me because she had her own problems. So I stayed with him, which at the time seemed like the right thing, but looking back, I don't know. Maybe it would have been better if I'd gone with her from the start. My dad married Sharon when I was 14, and she came with Danielle, her daughter who was 17 at the time, and from day one, things were weird. It's not like Sharon was obviously cruel or anything. It was more subtle, like those comments that technically aren't insults but make you feel like garbage anyway. Like, I'd come home from school, and there'd be food for everyone except me because I thought you were eating out, or she'd ask me to clean my room when Danielle's was a total disaster. But nobody said anything. To her, little things that add up, And my dad, well, he was so blinded by Sharon that he didn't see anything. Or didn't want to see. I'm not sure which is worse. Danielle was a whole other level completely. She was 20 when the watch thing happened, studying at community college, but basically living like she was an influencer or something. Always buying expensive clothes, going out with her friends, driving a BMW that my dad had bought her for her 19th birthday. I drove a 2008 Honda Civic that had been my grandma's, but I didn't even complain because at least I had a car, right? The point is that Danielle was living beyond her means, and I think Sharon knew it but never said anything because, her perfect baby couldn't do anything wrong. The house was big, like 4 bedrooms in a decent neighborhood, and I had my own room, which I guess was something, but I always felt like a guest, not like part of the family. Dinners were the worst because my dad, Sharon, and Danielle would talk about their stuff, and I'd just be there, pushing food around on my plate, waiting for it to end so I could go to my room. Sometimes my dad would try to include me, asking me things about school, but Sharon always found a way to change the subject back to Danielle and her incredible achievements. Like getting a B in a class that I knew was super easy, but everyone acted like she'd cured cancer. So we get to March of my senior year of high school. I was 17, about to graduate in June, and basically counting the days until I could get out and go to college, though I didn't know how I was going to pay for it because my dad had made it clear that the college fund he had with my mom ran out in the divorce, which honestly I think was a lie, but I couldn't prove it. Anyway, one day I came home from school and the house was in absolute chaos. My dad was going through all the drawers in his bedroom. Sharon was like hysterical, pacing back and forth, and Danielle was sitting on the couch with this worried face that I now know was completely fake. Turns out my dad's watch had disappeared. And it wasn't just any watch. It was a Rolex that his dad had given him, like my grandpa, when he graduated from college in the 82nds. That watch was worth like $15,000 easy. Maybe more. But for my dad, it wasn't about the money. It was the sentimental value because his dad had given it to him and it was the only thing he really cared about of all his possessions. He kept it in a special box in his closet and only wore it for important occasions, weddings, work events, I asked what had happened, and my dad was furious, like I'd never seen him like that. The veins in his neck were bulging and everything. He said he'd checked the box that morning because he had an important dinner that night and the watch wasn't there. Sharon immediately started saying that someone must have broken into the house, that maybe it was during the day when nobody was home. And I honestly thought the same thing because who among us would steal that watch? It didn't make sense. But then Danielle, with her good little girl voice that now makes me nauseous just remembering it, said she'd seen me coming out of my dad's room like 2 days ago. And everyone turned to look at me. I swear it was like in the movies when the record scratches and everything stops, because suddenly I was the suspect and I hadn't even processed what was happening. I said yes, that I had gone into my dad's room 2 days ago because I needed to ask him something about I don't know what. I think it was about graduation dinner or something. And he wasn't there, but I thought maybe he was in the bathroom, so I went in to look to him. That was it. I was literally there like 30 seconds. Sharon immediately said something like, "See? He had opportunity," and I just stood there thinking, seriously? Are you seriously accusing me? I told my dad that I hadn't touched anything, that I didn't even know exactly where he kept the watch, but Danielle kept insisting that she'd seen me acting suspicious, and that I'd closed the door quickly when she passed by in the hallway. I didn't remember closing any door quickly. In fact, I'm pretty sure she wasn't even in the house that day. But nobody believed me. My dad looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, like disappointment mixed with disgust, and asked me directly if I'd taken the watch. I said no, obviously, several times, but he kept asking, "Are you sure? Didn't you borrow it? Didn't you move it somewhere?" Like I was an idiot or a pathological liar. Sharon was there saying things like, "We always knew there were problems, and this isn't surprising considering where he comes from," which I guess was a reference to my mom and her problems, and I felt like I was going to explode, but I was also like paralyzed because I couldn't believe this was happening to me. I tried to defend myself, said they should search my room, look through my stuff, call the police if they wanted because I had nothing to hide. But Danielle said, and this kills me still, she said, I'd probably already sold it. That she'd seen in my search history that I'd been looking at pawn shop websites. That was completely false. I'd never searched for anything like that, but she said she'd used my computer to print something and saw it accidentally. My dad didn't even ask to see the computer to verify. He just believed her. Things escalated super fast from there. My dad basically decided right there that I was guilty. There was no conversation, no benefit of the doubt, nothing. He told me I had until the end of the day to pack my things and get out of his house, and when I tried to talk, when I tried to explain to him that this didn't make sense, that Danielle was lying, he literally yelled at me to shut up, that he didn't want to hear any more lies, that I disappointed him in the worst possible way. Sharon was there with her arms crossed, nodding her head, and Danielle had this expression that I swear I can now clearly see was satisfaction. But at that moment, I was so in shock that I wasn't processing anything correctly. I went to my room and started packing. I didn't know what to do. Where to go? Nothing. I called my mom and told her what had happened, and she couldn't believe it but told me I could stay with her. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, and I knew her situation was complicated. She had problems with depression and anxiety, sometimes didn't get out of bed for days. But it was that or the street, you know what I mean? I packed all my clothes, my books, my laptop, school stuff, everything I could fit in my car in, 2 trips. My dad stayed in the living room the whole time. He didn't come upstairs once to help me or talk to me. When I finished, I came down with the last box and he blocked the door. He told me, and I'll never forget these exact words, "You're not my son anymore. I don't want to see you again. Don't call me. Don't look for me. To me, you're dead." And I just stood there with the box in my hands, trembling, not from fear, but from rage and sadness mixed together. And all I could say was, "I didn't steal your watch," one last time before leaving. I drove to my mom's apartment crying, which was super dangerous because I almost crashed 3 times, but I needed to get out of there. The apartment was tiny. I slept on the couch because there was nowhere else. And all my stuff was in boxes stacked against the wall. My mom did the best she could. Honestly, she gave me space when I needed to be alone, made me food when she could, but she was dealing with her own demons and I didn't. I want to be an additional burden. I finished my last year of high school from that apartment. It was horrible, honestly, because all my friends knew something had happened, but I didn't want to talk about it, so I basically isolated myself. My grades dropped a bit, not drastically, but enough that some teachers asked if everything was okay, and I just said I was stressed about graduation and college, which technically wasn't a lie. Graduation was weird because my mom went, but she looked uncomfortable, and my dad didn't even show up, which, I expected, but it still hurt like hell. After graduating, I got a full-time job at a call center that paid $12 an hour, which wasn't much, but it was something. I worked 8-hour shifts, answering calls from angry people about their cable bills, and when I got to the apartment, I was so exhausted I just wanted to sleep. But I couldn't, because the couch was uncomfortable, and my mom watched TV late. I saved every penny I could for a whole year, living on practically $20 a week for food, not going out, not buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. I applied to several universities and got into a public one with decent financial aid. It wasn't my first choice, or my second either, but it was what I could afford with student loans and the money I'd saved. I moved to campus, to a shared dorm with 3 roommates who were basically strangers, and started classes in marketing because I thought it had a future and didn't require like 1,000 years of additional school. During those 4 years in college, I worked part-time, sometimes 2 jobs, studied like crazy, and basically became a version of myself I didn't recognize. I didn't have a real social life. I went out maybe once a month, if that, and most of the time I was studying or working or sleeping. My mom and I talked occasionally, but our relationship was weird. Like we loved each other, but didn't know how to really connect. She kept struggling with her problems. I was struggling with mine, and we both basically pretended everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. My dad never contacted me. Not a call, not a text, nothing. It was like I'd really died to him. And honestly, there came a point where I erased him from my mind too because it was easier than being angry all the time. I blocked his number, deleted all his photos from my social media, everything. If anyone mentioned their family, I'd say I wasn't in contact with my dad and change the subject. My paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, tried to contact me a couple of times during that time. He sent letters to my mom's address asking how I was, telling me he missed me, that he wanted to see me. I responded a couple of times, short letters like, "I'm fine, studying, thanks for asking," but I never accepted his invitations to visit him because I didn't want to risk seeing my dad. My grandpa lived on a farm like 2 hours from where I was, and I knew my dad visited him regularly, so no thanks. I graduated from college like 6 months ago, got a job at a digital marketing startup that pays well enough for me to have my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. You know, nobody can kick me out. I was starting to feel like I finally had control over my life, that things were improving, when I received a letter from my grandpa inviting me to his 75th birthday party. The letter was super personal, handwritten, telling me how much it would mean to him if I was there, that he understood if I didn't want to go, but that he really hoped to see me. He mentioned it was going to be a big family gathering, which made me hesitate immediately because I knew my dad, Sharon, and Danielle would be there. But he also mentioned that he had something important to share with the family, and that he hoped I'd be present to hear it. I don't know what it was. Maybe curiosity, maybe the fact that I missed my grandpa, but I decided to go. I replied that yes, I'd attend, and during the weeks leading up to it, I was like nervous all the time, thinking about what it would be like to see my dad after 4 years. Part of me wanted to confront him, yell everything I'd been holding in, but another part just wanted to completely ignore him, treat him like the stranger he'd treated me as. The day of the party arrived, a Saturday in September, and I drove to my grandpa's farm with my stomach in knots. The farm looked the same as always, big, with a huge yard where they'd set up tables and decorations. There were like 40 or 50 people. Extended family I barely knew. My grandpa's friends, neighbors. I parked my car and sat there for like 10 minutes trying to gather courage to go in. When I finally got out of the car, I saw my grandpa on the porch. He's 75, but looks good for his age, like still tall and strong, with that white beard he's always had. His face lit up when he saw me, and he came down the stairs faster than I expected for someone his age. He hugged me tight and told me how much he'd missed me, and I honestly almost started crying right there, but I held back because I didn't want to make a scene. We went in together, and I immediately saw my dad on the other side of the yard talking with some uncles. He looked older, like he had more gray hair and looked tired, but I guess 4 years do that. Sharon was next to him in a dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, and Danielle was taking selfies with some cousins near the dessert table. None of them saw me at first. Or maybe they did and were just ignoring me, I don't know. My grandpa introduced me to a bunch of people I didn't remember, and everyone was super nice, asking me about college, my job, all that. I was in the middle of a conversation with a second cousin or something when I felt someone staring at me. I turned around, and there was my dad, looking at me with this expression I can't describe, like surprise mixed with something else. Discomfort, maybe? We held eye contact for like 5 seconds that felt like an eternity, and then he looked away and continued with his conversation like nothing had happened. That hurt more than I expected. Honestly, because a stupid part of me thought that maybe he'd come over, that maybe he'd try to talk, but no, clearly I was still dead to him. The party continued. We ate. My grandpa blew out the candles on a huge cake. People toasted. Typical family event. I kept to the periphery, talking with random people but basically avoiding my dad and his family. At one point, Danielle walked near me and shot me this like haughty look. You know, like saying, "You shouldn't be here," and I just ignored her because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Then my grandpa stood in the middle of the yard and asked for everyone's attention. He said he wanted to thank everyone for coming, that it meant a lot to him to reach 75 years surrounded by family, and that he had something important to share. Everyone got quiet and came, closer to listen, and I stayed back near a table, kind of hidden behind some tall uncles. My grandpa started by saying that he'd discovered something a few months ago that had left him devastated, and that after a lot of reflection, he'd decided it was time for the truth to come to light. My heart started beating fast because I didn't know what he was talking about, but something in his tone told me this was going to be big. He looked directly at my dad and said, "Paul, 4 years ago you disowned your son for something he didn't do. You threw him out of your house. You erased him from your life. And all this time you've been living on the family farm, supported by the inheritance I gave you, while your son struggled alone to survive." The silence that followed was absolute, like nobody was breathing. My dad looked confused and started to say something, but my grandpa raised his hand to quiet him. Then he looked at Danielle and said, "3 months ago, I received a call from the pawn shop downtown. Apparently someone had tried to sell my watch, the Rolex I gave Paul, and the owner recognized it because it has my initials engraved on it. He kept the security video and contacted me because he knew it was an important family item." Danielle's face went white, literally, like all the blood had drained from it. Sharon tried to say something, but my grandpa continued. "I went to the pawn shop, watched the video, and there you were, Danielle, selling the watch for $8,000. The owner told me you mentioned you needed money urgently to repair a car you'd crashed, and that you didn't want your parents to find out." Everything exploded there. My dad turned to Danielle, yelling, "What?" Sharon was trying to say this was a mistake, that there had to be an explanation. And Danielle started crying, saying she was so sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that she was scared. My grandpa let the chaos continue for a minute before speaking again, louder this time. "Danielle didn't just steal the watch," my grandpa said. "She also destroyed an innocent kid's life to cover her crime. And you, Paul, chose to believe her over your own son without even giving him the benefit of the doubt. And you, Sharon, facilitated all of this because you never wanted that boy in your house anyway." I was standing there unable to move a muscle, processing what I'd just heard. 4 years. 4 years of my life ruined by a lie, and now finally everyone knew the truth. My grandpa looked at me and said, "Come here, son." And I walked over, trembling because I didn't know what else to do. He put his hand on my shoulder and told the whole family. This young man was thrown out of his house at 17 years old, had to live with a mother who could barely take care of herself, worked multiple jobs while studying, graduated from college without anyone's help, and now has a good job and his own life. And he did it all while carrying the shame of a false accusation. He deserves an apology. He deserves justice, and he deserves to be acknowledged by his family. My dad tried to approach me, but I instinctively backed away. He looked destroyed, like tears running down his face, saying "I'm sorry" over and over, but I couldn't. I couldn't listen to him at that moment. It was too much. Everything was too much. I told my grandpa I needed to leave, thanked him for discovering the truth, and got out of there as fast as possible without looking back. I drove back to my apartment on autopilot, not really remembering the way. When I got there, I sat on the couch and just stayed there, staring at the wall for I don't know how long. My phone started ringing like crazy, calls from my dad, text messages, but I couldn't respond. I didn't know what to say. The messages started like this: "Please let me explain. I have no words for what I did. I was the worst father in the world. I need to talk to you." They kept coming, one after another, and I finally turned off the phone because I couldn't to handle it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just stayed there thinking about everything. about the last 4 years, about how different my life would have been if my dad had believed me, if Danielle wasn't a manipulative liar, if Sharon wasn't so toxic. Like a week later, my grandpa called me. He explained that he'd been investigating more things after discovering about the watch, and that he'd found out Sharon and Danielle had been running other types of financial scams for years. Apparently, Danielle had credit cards in my dad's name that he didn't know existed, with debts of like $40,000, and Sharon had been taking money from my dad's accounts for emergencies that never existed. Everything was coming to light now, and my dad was completely devastated, finally seeing who these people really were. My grandpa told me he'd made a difficult but necessary decision. He was disinheriting my dad and putting all his property and inheritance in my name directly, skipping the middle generation. The farm, the money, everything. He said my dad didn't deserve anything after what he'd done to me, and that besides he didn't trust that Sharon and Danielle wouldn't try to take everything from him eventually. My dad would have to leave the farm in 6 months and find another place to live. I'm not going to lie, part of me felt satisfaction when I heard that, but another part just felt empty. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It never was. I just wanted my dad to have believed me. You know? The money and property didn't change the last 4 years, didn't erase the pain of being discarded like trash. My dad showed up at my apartment like 2 weeks after my grandpa's birthday. He knocked on the door and there he was, looking worse than at the party, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked me to please let him in, that he needed to talk to me. I hesitated for a long time, but finally opened the door and let him in. He sat on my couch and started talking, saying everything he'd probably rehearsed saying, that he'd been an idiot, that he'd let Sharon manipulate him, that he should have defended me, that he should never have doubted me, that the last 4 years had eaten him alive with guilt, but he was so ashamed he didn't know how to reach out. He said Sharon had asked for a divorce, that she was taking what little he had, that Danielle wasn't even returning his calls now that everything had come to light. I listened to him in silence, without interrupting, and when he finished, I told him the only thing I could say, "You destroyed me. At 17 years old, you threw me out without listening to me. You called me a thief. You said I was dead to you. I lost 4 years of my life struggling alone, hating myself, wondering what I'd done wrong to deserve that. And now you come here expecting what? For me to tell you everything's okay? That I forgive you?" My dad was crying, like sobbing, saying he didn't expect forgiveness, that he just needed me to know how sorry he was, that he'd do anything to try to fix things. I told him I couldn't forgive him now. Maybe I never could, and that I needed time to process everything. I asked him to leave, and he accepted, leaving me his new phone number in case I ever wanted to talk. It's been like 3 months since that. My grandpa formalized the inheritance papers, and my dad, Sharon and Danielle, had to move out of the farm. Sharon did file for divorce, and didn't get much of anything, because turns out there was a prenup she'd signed without reading carefully, and besides, the evidence of financial fraud worked against her. Danielle basically disappeared, blocked everyone in the family, and nobody really knows where she is or what she's doing, though I heard she's living with a boyfriend in another state. My dad lives now in a small apartment, working at a regular job because the business he had with Sharon went to hell. He sends me messages every so often, nothing invasive, just like, "I hope you're well," or "I'm here if you need anything," and I sometimes respond with a thanks or an emoji, nothing more. I don't know if someday we're going to have a real relationship again. Honestly, I don't know if I want that either. I visit my grandpa every 2 weeks or so. We go to dinner, talk about how things are going. Sometimes we spend the day at the farm doing minor repairs or just enjoying the space. He tells me he's proud of me, that I'm stronger than anyone he knows, and that means more than he can imagine. He offered me to move to the farm, but I told him no, that I need my own space for now, that maybe in the future when I'm ready. Last week I was at a coffee shop, working on my laptop when I saw a family at the next table, a dad with his teenage son laughing about something on the phone, and I felt this weird pang in my chest. I don't know if it was sadness for what I lost or acceptance that my life took a different path. Probably both. What I do know is that I can finally sleep at night without that constant rage burning inside me, and that has to count for something, right? I have my job, my apartment, my independence. I have a rebuilt relationship with my grandpa. That's genuine and healthy. I have the truth on my side after years of carrying a lie. It's not the happy movie ending I maybe expected, but it's real, it's mine, and I finally feel like I have control over my own life. And for now, that's enough.